Torah.org, speaking to you from Efrat, Israel. I'm going to be speaking about the Parsha of this week, Parsha Vayishlach. And I'm going to discuss the topic of this discussion is the general concept of the struggle between Jacob and Esau, Jacob and Esau, which represents the constant struggle that we as Jews have, as well as people in the rest of the world have, between good and evil. It is an ongoing struggle. So this lesson that we're going to talk about from this Parsha will explain a very important way of dealing with the issue of your struggling between good and evil. First of all, let's talk about what's happening here. Last week's Parsha ended with Jacob, after living with Lavan for many years, having a family, and finally leaving to go back to Eretz Yisrael, back to Israel. And on the way, that's where this Parsha begins, he sends messengers ahead of him to Esau, his brother Esau. And we remember that his brother Esau really hated Jacob, hated Yaakov, because of getting the birthright from him, because of getting the blessing from his father. And he was always thinking of when their father died, he would go out and kill Yaakov. And that, of course, is why Yaakov's mother, Rivka, said, "You have to leave." And he left the house, studied for 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, and then went to Lavan, where he married Rachel and Leah. And now he's returning. So he's sending these messengers to find out, does Esau still have this animosity towards him? Does he still want to kill him? And messengers come back and say, yes, we went there and we found Esau, and there's 400 men with him coming towards you. Obviously, he feared that they're coming to destroy him and his family. So he tried sending a bunch of gifts to Esau. He sent the messengers back with lots of gifts to try to appease him. And then he decided that, okay, if the gifts don't work, we'll try something else. I have to divide my family into two camps, so that if Esau would come to one and strike them, then the other would be able to flee. So that's what he did. And then he crossed over the river by himself. Some say he crossed over the river by himself because he left some little thing over on the other side, which is another lesson. The Torah is full of lessons. Another lesson as to the importance of even the slightest thing that you own, the slightest thing that you earn. It's important and not to be abandoned. So he crossed over. And when he crossed over, he was confronted with what appeared to be an unknown person who started wrestling with him until all night long, until the dawn. And it turned out, as the commentators say, that this person wasn't an ordinary person. This was the Sar of Esau, the angel of Esau. And it was represented by what we referred to as the Sitra Achar, the other side, the negative part. In more vernacular terms, the Satan, Satan, but it's that force that causes people to do bad in the world. So that was struggling with the struggle of bad to overcome the good of Yaakov. And the struggle was so intense that the Parsha says, Vayavek ish imo, a person was wrestling with him so, the wrestling match was so hard that dust was rising up to the heavens. And the dust really was the fact that the angel of Esau was trying to blind Yaakov as to what is good in the world and trying to encourage him to do what is bad. Anyway, in the morning when he found that he couldn't win this battle, the angel begged Yaakov to let him go at that point. He says, I have to go serve God now. And Yaakov let him go, but before he did, the angel injured Yaakov in the sciatic nerve area of his thigh, of his back. And the story goes on. And there's a very interesting, so first of all, one of the things we learned from this is the Torah says, Vayavaser Yaakov levado. Yaakov was left alone. It teaches us a very important lesson that as a Jew and as a human being, we should never be alone. Right now, we're in a time of crisis where many people are lonely because of the COVID-19, but we have to support everybody as much as possible. We have to be united. We have to unite with people. So part of the reason that he was involved in this struggle and was ultimately injured from it was because he was alone. So the Meforshim teach us that it's key to be united. If we are united as a people, no evil can befall us. Then in the few sentences later, the Torah tells us, "Vayizrach lo Hashemesh kasher eber es penuel v'hitzaluya al Yerecho." The sun rose upon Yaakov, and he was limping on his hip. And then there's a very strange pasuk after that. It says, "Al kain lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael's gid hanasha asher al kaf hayarech ad hayom hazeh ki nega b'chaf yerech Yaakov b'gid hanasha." That is why the children of Israel to this day do not eat the sciatic nerve, the nerve that is on the muscle of the hip, since Jacob's sciatic nerve was injured. Now that's a very strange thing. What in the world does his injury to the sciatic nerve have to do with us not being able to eat that part of the animal? And in fact, anywhere except in Israel, where they have the Masorah to really cut out the Gid HaNasha, that specific nerve, everybody else, you can't have it. So in the rest of the world, when you're eating kosher food, you can't eat what really is probably the most tasty part of the animal. But what's this? So there's a couple of interesting Meforshim on it. One is the Seforno. And he says that the moral lesson is that just as the Gid HaNasha, the sciatic nerve, is totally devoid of taste and does not appeal to the palate, so that consuming it would not provide the sinner with any kind of gratification. In other words, it's a nerve. You're eating a nerve that has no taste. Similarly, we're taught, he says, not to second guess God's legislation by treating this commandment as not important. That's one message. Another message I saw, and I don't remember who I saw it from, was the reason we don't eat this part of the animal, we deprive ourselves of a good portion of an animal, is to teach us the importance of never, ever to let a Jew be alone. Never let us again repeat a situation by Vayavasar Yaakov Levado. Let us all take this message to heart, try to unite with our loved ones, with the rest of humanity. Let's learn to love one another. And in that way, we will be able to be victorious in the struggle of good over evil. Thank you for listening on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I wish everybody a healthy, safe, and joyous Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.